Today's guest is Nate Follen, who is the head of business systems operations at Ramp and a former business systems leader at Intercom as well. And I'm really stoked about today's conversation because Ramp is obviously a generational company. They were the fastest company ever to 100 million ARR, and legendary investor Keith Raboy called them the, quote, best run private company on the planet. And so today we're going to dive into what they're doing different on the revenue side, how this business is run, what business systems looks like at Ramp, and how AI is being used specifically. So Nate, really excited to dive in. Thanks for joining.
Hey, Kyle. Thanks for having me. Excited to do it.
Hello and welcome to the Revenue Leadership Podcast by Topline. I'm your host, Kyle Norton, CRO at owner.com. And every Wednesday, we dive deep into the strategies and tactics being used to drive success by the best revenue leaders in the world. So join me as I sit down with revenue operators to discuss actionable frameworks that you can implement in your business today with no fluff, no sales pitches, and no platitudes.
This episode of the Revenue Leadership Podcast is brought to you by Superhuman. Superhuman is an AI-powered email app that helps sellers respond, collaborate, and close faster. With features like inbox triage, automatic reminders, and collaborative email drafts, reps can filter out distractions to focus on what they do best, selling. Get the email experience that keeps deals moving. Try Superhuman free for 1 month at superhuman.com/pavilion.
I gave a little tiny background, so give people your 60-second intro, a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, so I came background in the life sciences, actually did an undergrad and grad degree in genetics. From then on, just decided, big data was going to kind of eat up the roles and jobs, and genetics wasn't necessarily a fun workspace, working in a lab. I like people too much. So joined it as a fifth employee at a small startup in the benefits space, kind of a competitor to Zenefits back then, and was kind of doing everything. A lot of go-to-market systems work, sales forecasting work, working with insurance carriers and doing some product updates, and got deep into the Salesforce ecosystem. From there, did a few other systems manager roles, joined Intercom, where we were moving from kind of a product-led company to more of a sales-led company, moving up market. And then from there, moved into the restaurant tech space, which we'd love to chat with you about, over at Bento Box for a brief stint before they were acquired. The company was then Fiserv, and it was a little bit much more slower moving than Ramp, I would say. So I had the opportunity to join the team over at Ramp. Seemed like a great position for my background, and have been here for about 3 years.
Very cool. And we have a ton of personal crossover. Owner and Ramp are both Redpoint portfolio companies. We're both very excited customers of Momentum. So I feel like we got a lot to dig into today. Absolutely. And so, as I mentioned at the top, we're going to talk about how this business gets run, what's unique about it, spend a bunch of time talking about AI, both what you're doing today and how you're thinking about the future. And so we'll start with just an intro question. And I mentioned Ramp is one of the fastest growing startups of all time. Monstrous valuation of over 8 billion, only a couple years in. So what the heck is it like to try to build business systems and infrastructure at a company that's just growing that fast?
Yeah, short answer is it's a lot of fun. Frankly, yeah. The reason why I joined was the growth trajectory and the talent and people that I had the opportunity to work with every day. With that comes with every day or week, there may be different priorities. So the shifting priorities and using my experience to understand what should we work on today to help drive revenue growth for our go-to-market teams. And to be honest, over the last 3 years, and I've talked to people, there's Ramp years, we call them, is how long you've been at Ramp. They feel like kind of like dog years, quite a bit longer than an actual year. But it does feel like a few different companies I've been at in my time here, thinking back at kind of where the state of systems and go-to-market was when I joined versus just a year later, and a year after that has been quite a big shift.
And do you guys still count in days? I've heard your CEO mention like the day since founding. He's like, it's day 1,100. Is that a thing?
That's definitely a thing. I think I had my days pulled up. I'm around 1,000, so coming up on that 1,000 mark. Ramp, I think, is 3,300. I think we have a quick Go link that I can pull up here. Yeah,
cool.
2131. That's where we're at today.
2131. Nice. And one of the things that I took from a bunch of Eric's interviews, Eric Glyman, who's the CEO, is just the like intensity and speed at which the company is trying to operate. And so what does that do to you in business systems? Because sometimes business systems infrastructure speed is not the optimal, is not the right thing to be optimizing for, because you need to build for longevity and scalability and stability. So how do you personally try to manage those two things, this like intense urgency, which seems to be a superpower for the company, but also trying to be really scalable and not be like rebuilding stuff every 4 to 6 months?
Yeah, I think you kind of have to lead with empathy and understand, like, hey, is this something that we're all aligned on making a change? And the great thing about Ramp is that we can build that alignment really quick. It's a pretty flat organization. You can send out a quick Slack message or get a Slack channel spun up where everyone's just aligned on a new project or a shift in data architecture or a shift in measurement on a part of the funnel that will be super impactful. And then once folks are aligned, it's really just what's blocking us from making this change. Is it a reporting issue? Because to your point, you don't want to change what you're reporting on from board meeting to board meeting and change metrics that are key and not have a through line of how the business is operating over time. So there are some times where there's trade-offs. We don't want to change everything every week, but we want to build systems and data capture in a way that we can. So I think speed of change is actually one of the quiet superpowers that's not talked about quite as much, but the ability to say, this is a great idea, let's make this change at scale at over 1,000 employees now, and we can still do it really quickly is one of the great things about Ramp that I haven't really seen at other companies.
So what's the secret there? Like, what's the secret to moving that fast?
It's just everybody really being on the court and passionate about what they're doing. We're a very Slack heavy organization. Like I said, very flat too. So people are very autonomous to, hey, this is a good idea, let's make that change. On the system side, it's hiring great talent. It's people that have used business systems before, can call out gotchas or when we're building in a way that really isn't that scalable, and what the call outs for are trade-offs for if we're building something in kind of a hacky way that will work for the next few months, but not work at scale. Just having that called out and understanding that that's a piece of debt that we're willing to take on for the outcome. But yeah, the other secret is just hard work. So staying on the court, staying engaged, and caring about what you deliver.
Yeah, makes a ton of sense. One of the things I found interesting about how Eric was talking about the engineering org is just how much autonomy they could push down. It seems like you guys have built the engineering teams into quite small pods with really specific mandates, and the teams were small. And so is that similar in your neck of the woods as well?
Yes. Yeah. Our team right now on the go-to-market system side, my team is 5, including MarTech. And we have a couple other business systems engineers. So that team, I think, is 3 or 4 that do kind of Salesforce, Apex code and things like that. And yeah, I think our mandate, as a company is to try to save our customers time and money. And headcount is a big cost, really. So if we can build like enterprise-ready, scalable systems with a small team that's very accountable for what they build, that's great. And if we're building things that really need to be built, we need to hire more headcount to support them. That's something that I would need to kind of justify. So we do like to keep lean teams, relatively simple systems where we can, and hire the right people that can maintain and prioritize asks.
So smaller, more high-powered teams, just like top talent.
And one other thing that how we structure is some teams will kind of have a shared resource of systems that different parts of the company can go to with new asks. We are very funnel aligned. So we have systems engineering team or business systems analysts on my team that are aligned to different parts of the funnel, like MarTech, SDR, AE. So there's really one person focused on their micro workflows and workflows that they need to work to do their jobs. And that really helps kind of focus all the efforts to being more like a product owner, product manager, where you're actually dealing with vendors or different SaaS tools that may be external, but you're ultimately the one responsible for how the AE is efficient in their role and choosing the project work that will make them more efficient.
No better way to build empathy. Just
Right.
sit them deep in that org. We're actually just in the process of growing our RevOps team in this same model. We've moved to Agile. The RevOps teams are now aligned to those specific functions. We don't have AE versus BDR. It's sales, launch, CS as the key stakeholders, and driving that depth. That depth of alignment, that depth of sort of stakeholder engagement, I think is gonna help us move a lot faster.
Awesome. So you have an operational person and a systems person kind of paired with those parts of the funnel?
Well, we're still much smaller than you guys. We're like 200 employees, so it's one product owner for each of those functional areas, and they are running. They're doing requirements gathering, scoping, solutioning, working with the stakeholder to figure out what we want to build, and then most of our development is done on contract, both onshore and offshore. And as we scale, we'll probably get to a model more similar to yours, where you can have those pods, you can have different resources. But I think the business function alignment means that individual develops enough depth in the craft to make really good decisions. I have found in my career that the best RevOps leaders that I've worked with have a combination of the technical acumen, but also business acumen and a depth in that craft that they're supporting. My head of RevOps was a former sales leader. He was a second line BDR leader, sales manager before that, and then transitioned, which means that the decision making is so much better, because I've been in other situations where I've partnered with a more purely technical individual, and the technical answer was great, but it was an answer that had no hope of adoption. It's like, oh, let's just slap some more required fields on that object. Let's just like split this out and ask the reps to do this, this, and this, and that's oftentimes set up for failure.
Yep.
Versus if you have an individual with like deep role empathy, you can understand. It's like, okay, we're dealing with SMB reps. They're moving really fast. They're probably not going to fill in 6 new fields with a lot of depth. So let's go automate that for them. Like using momentum, like let's go fill it in. So,
or even worse than that, if you ask them, they'll fill in a totally different answer and just
they're just putting in crap, and then like you know less than you did before you had no information in the fields.
Yep.
So let's talk about scale and like scaling systems to keep up. So you've been there almost 1,000 days. How much has the sales team grown in that span of time?
Geez, I think we've probably tripled since the time I joined. I think we're upwards of around 400 now, I think.
Wow. Okay. And so in business systems, what have you guys done to live up to that very heady statement, being the best run private company on the planet? Like, how are you doing that at GTM?
Yeah, I think that the process is kind of what I outlined. We stay very close and are aligned. So if there's a systems issue, every leader knows who to go ask and can escalate my way. And I see my job is really help prioritize and get out of the way and make sure that we're still building in a way that's going to work for the entire company and funnel, such that we're not building totally bespoke products for different parts of the funnel. Now how our sales leads kind of love our go-to-market systems or enjoy our go-to-market systems is having real clarity as to what's happening in the field. And you hit on momentum a little bit. That's been a game changer for us in terms of allowing the individual sales leads to get the information that they may want without having to have an engineer go make a bunch of changes for one person for one alert. So that's been a great tool of saying, all right, sales leads, we can actually turn around your ask here in about 10 minutes. And maintain it very easily over time versus, that's a big internal build, or we're just going to do a one size fits all for the entire sales org. So as we've evolved our sales org, we've wanted to learn different things about different teams, and Momentum's been one great tool of just sharing information of what's happening out in the field.
And just going one step more strategic, like how does the sales team run? Um, how does the sales team run in a way that is like different than others that you've seen?
Yeah, I think they're all like the way we hire for slope. Everyone's very, very curious. I've heard kind of Eric speak to the importance of curiosity.
Yeah.
So even if it's a new sales tool that's out there, if it's a new product that could make them more efficient, people will dig into that and kind of help write up a value justification for doing a trial. We're very experimental as well. So sometimes the answer is not a blanket yes, we're going to shift to this. It's all right, let's pull out a tiger team of AEs. Let's test this new gifting is one example. Let's test
Mm.
gifting out at a certain part of the funnel to see if that accelerates our deal cycles. So pull out a tiger team, did some analytical, got the numbers behind if it was influencing revenue, if it was influencing our close rate or
Mm.
timeline to close a deal. And then we ended up seeing really good results and adopted it. So it's one of those things where if we have a good idea, let's pull out a tiger team, test it out, and then roll it out broad like to our broader teams.
So you're very much operating like a product team. Have a hypothesis, goes tested.
Yep. Yeah. If something's broken, we have to do just general maintenance and support and communication around what's broken, what the timeline of fix will be, reporting, stakeholder intake, and then we operate in sprints.
Okay, makes sense. So what have been some of the biggest business systems investments you've made to drive efficiency, productivity, performance in sales? Like what have been some of your big wins?
Yeah, I think some of the big wins have been we kind of hit on momentum in the AI, just getting the most out of our transcripts, being able to pull specific pieces of information, send them over to the product teams or channel teams or sales leads. A recent one has really been just we went deep on our win reasons, loss reasons, and we look at why we're winning deals, why we're losing deals. But there's not much we can do to in the very near term to adjust that. We try to kind of rinse and repeat, make improvements in our product, make improvements in our sales process. But we really want to catch those deals before we lose them, ideally, and pull in the right.
Mm,
So, so what we have for managers now is a KG buyer alert or a deal risk alert, where hey, this person doesn't look very engaged. Let's bring in the manager and see, what are some of the reasons they're not as engaged, and let's see if we can nip that or like get to a better outcome before the deal
mm.
is lost.
And where did you build that?
That's built in momentum Slack.
Okay. And so the trigger is, well, tell me about the triggers. Like what did you set up to identify a KG buyer? I love that.
Yeah, KG buyer. No, it was an idea from the field. So it was, hey, I would love to learn if someone's being totally unengaged. Let's notify the manager to get involved. And the prompt is actually very long. So a lot of with the new AI, you actually have to kind of tweak the prompt quite a bit. Here we fed it some examples of looking at real calls, saying like some examples include this, camera off, like other things like that.
Mm,
That could feed into it. And emails is the other kind of key piece that Momentum offers, which is people don't always break up with you over face-to-face conversation.
yeah.
Oftentimes it's coming through an email, like not right now, maybe we can connect in a few months, we're very busy, etc., which is totally fine. But leading into forecasting, and if there's any way to accelerate deals or multi-thread, it's great for the manager to at least know of that.
Yeah. That should just be put to bed.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. So momentum being a big area of investment, what else have been some of your big wins that you've made infrastructure wise?
Yeah, our tech stack is pretty straightforward. Salesforce, HubSpot on the marketing side, and then Gong. So Gong is kind of our source for transcripts today, and we use that for forecasting as well.
Okay. After I don't even know how long, 7-8 years, just canceled Gong.
Yep.
It was so expensive, and I'm actually moving call recording into Momentum. And if you had told me 24 months ago that I was going to cancel Gong, I would have thought you were nuts, because it's been such an important part of our stack. But it's wild how with generative AI, like all of that is commoditized now. Like you can get any, I use Fireflies, there's Otter, there's Fathom. or Momentum doing it for like a fraction of the cost. I'm just peeling it out.
Yep. That's one of the things I've probably changed my mind about in the recent years is there used to be this North Star in the systems world of tool consolidation, right? Let's bring everybody into one tool, one centralized tool, especially if you're a global company like you have, you really need some tool consolidation to tell the story of your business. And operationally it sounds great, but it's not always the best thing for your teams. So we've really optimized towards what's best for our team. Let's select the best in class vendor for our go to market teams to operate the best and be the most efficient. So I almost prefer having really strong module products that you can plug in. They do excellent. They do great at what they're supposed to do. You can build or buy these products and kind of plug them in. That leaves you in a place where you're not going to have to make a massive shift if you decide to change one thing, and it's actually he still ends up using the best in class tools. And call recording is one of those too. I think it's something that is turning out to be a pretty easy build to build a call recording software, and so we love all of our vendors, but yeah, it's one of those that we do analyze each year at time of renewals. Hey, could we build this? Should we buy this? What's the cost, and what are we getting out of this tool?
Yeah. I have gone through a similar journey, and at one point was like, I want everything in one thing. I consolidated everything, consolidated everything in SalesLoft. And then we started using SalesLoft, including call recording. I was like, oh, it's just not where I wanted it to be. And then I bought Gong. I brought Gong in. We didn't have it at the time. And I go through ebbs and flows, I find. But the nice thing is it feels like more tools have pretty decent interoperability today than maybe before. And if not, it's so much easier to build your own through like Zapier or building your own API integrations. Like we integrate into SalesLoft in a bunch of like unique ways, from Snowflake directly to SalesLoft actually.
Okay. And do you use that data in Snowflake then for reporting, or?
Yeah, so we have a bunch of stuff that happens in the Snowflake layer, which is like lead scoring and routing. So in Snowflake, we have two scoring mechanisms that run, one for like deal value, and then one for propensity. So e.g. GMV and eWin, estimated win rate. And then those two things power what we call iRoute. And so iRouting basically just takes the best leads by these two scores and then routes it directly into the cadence for that sales rep. So the BDR doesn't have to do anything. Like so iRoute runs at night. If you've got 60 do call steps the next day, we really want you to have 100 do call steps the next day. So it just puts in enough calls to get you to that number of the highest scored leads that are available. And that's not possible with any like off the shelf tooling really, because like it's our own ML model for both of those, and we wanted to pick up a bunch of other data that's not just Salesforce data. But the SalesLoft API ecosystem is good enough where you can just ping the API, have that lead, get into that rep's ownership, and then plop it right into the cadence. And we've got a very capable data ops team. So we're starting to do more and more of that.
That's awesome. And is the data quality that's coming in for your leads? I remember in the restaurant space, people are notorious for @gmail.coms and things like that, or coms. Do you have any suggestions or recs for how to kind of de-anonymize that and score it, or what have you used in the past?
Yeah. So we built a very complicated scraping and enrichment system where we were pulling from all sorts of places on the internet. It was getting synthesized, going into a Gen AI model, and then eventually like we would get to a confidence level of that person's restaurant name, their name and mobile phone number. And this is all our data ops leader, Jonathan Shankman, and he built this whole thing. And now we actually use a vendor for it called Data Lane, which does a bunch of that now at like a bigger scale with a higher quality. So our mobile phone enrichment rate is like 95%. So when BDRs are sitting down, they have high quality leads that actually have a mobile phone number, because if you remember in restaurant, like trying to get to an owner is impossible. But if you have their mobile, it's easy. And especially in the US, those mobile phone numbers are easy to get as long as you know that individual's location and name. You can hit the People Data Labs API, return that information, and then we've got good sentiment and disposition infrastructure so that as those reps are calling, they can say, right person, wrong number, no longer with the organization. They can give us that feedback, and then we can go groom those leads.
I like that right person, wrong number. Okay.
Yeah. I have a slide of our dispositions all laid out if you want to see it, because the taxonomy there I find is so important to make it easy for the rep to be like, did a call connect? Did it connect with a gatekeeper or somebody, an owner direct, and on what phone number? And then of those things, like what is my result of it? Not interested, call back later, pitch out. And if you can make that really straightforward for the reps, then you get high quality data. And
Yeah.
it sounds like you have a similar philosophy, like optimize for the rep experience, because then you get good insight.
Yeah, I think, I'd love to see that, because I know we have like bad data, but that could mean three things. So if there's like, we could split it out into two things: right person, wrong number, or generic number, but we got a hold. We do kind of split out the outcome of the call as well as the disposition. But always room for improvement.
Yeah. How do you think about trying to understand and build things that are rep-centric, that like reps are actually going to be excited about, versus like, oh shoot, here's another thing from RevOps that's going to get in my way?
Yeah, well, most of our project work comes in some collaboration or an idea, either from RevOps or a customer or a sales leader. So we try to first understand, what do we want the experience of our customer or prospect to be, and how can we make it, the ideal on ramp, pun not intended, for them to get onto ramp. And so, what does that look like? Does it mean a call cadence with um, with a person that knows their industry? Can we set the SD up with a playbook right away that helps them understand the industry that they're calling into? Because Ramp's unique in that our TAM is massive. We can almost every company. So where it's challenging is if we have newer sales teams or sales folks as we're scaling up, they have to learn about the automotive industry, the restaurant business, very technical CFOs and things like that. So, and high tech businesses. So I think Eric has talked about how we have potato farmers all the way through Shopify. And so businesses are so variant that it is nice to use AI and tools like that to surface the right playbooks to help them understand who they're talking to, because nobody, it's just terrible customer experience to jump on with somebody that knows the Ramp product but doesn't know their business at all or how they operate financially. So that's what our goal is, to try to first optimize what we want the experience to be, and then back into the tools that we use to make it happen in the process, to make it happen.
And so what are you doing to try to build the segment empathy? Have you segmented the teams? Are you giving them tools to like know this stuff better? Unpack that.
This is where I think we do a lot of experiments. We say like, all right, we're in a multi-product world right now. It used to just be kind of Ramp Card was our core. Now we have, I think, over 5 products with a new product launching what feels like every couple of months.
Yeah.
And we have one, upcoming that's exciting. And so with that, it's we need to enable the team on it. Luckily, the sales team is always excited about our new product launches. But what we're doing is really just building out these playbooks, making sure they're in front of the sellers and embedded in their systems that they use, like Salesforce, HighSpot, enablement tools. And then we're also feeding those with competitive intelligence, understanding, okay, they're evaluating other tools. Let's speak to that and have these kind of playbooks and competitive intelligence in front of them at the time that it's useful, because nobody's going to spend a Saturday just reading through new marketing material or new product enablement material. They would like it at the time of the call. And we also use AI to kind of ask questions about our product. If we get, I have a note here on AI sales engineer. Instead of saying we'll take that as a follow up and we'll connect in an email, we can actually just send a Slack bot. Hey, does our product do this? Yes, it does. Here's the resources. Okay, we can answer it on that call now, rather than looping in an engineer.
Hmm.
Those are
Did you guys build that in house, or is that a off the shelf tool?
that was built in house.
Is that what Toby is? I heard Eric talk about Toby built out of the applied AI team.
Yeah, very very similar. So it's kind of more built on our product information and things like that. And then I think Toby is more built on call transcripts.
Okay, cool. And so I'm going to come back to Toby. I've got more questions about how you guys interface with the applied AI team. But before we tie off this like systems topic, curious, what do you think are the big mistakes that RevOps and systems teams make at fast scaling companies? Like, what are the biggest landmines that people should be trying to avoid if they're, I mean, nobody's going to be on the ramp trajectory, but if you're like 10, 20 million, you're still doubling, like that's fast growth. Where do you think it can go off the rails?
Yeah, I think so. Ramp trajectory, it may actually be not hiring fast enough, right? Like we have people interested in our product. Can we give them the right level of guidance throughout the sales process to get them active, understanding and using our product and adopting ramp? So not only hiring too fast, that's obviously a big misstep where you have to either downsize or rethink your targets, but hiring too slow can also leave a lot on the table if you're really in hyperscaling mode.
And what about on systems building? Like what are the big architecture decisions that you feel like people can get right or wrong?
Yeah, on the system side, the biggest one that I've seen both at Ramp, Intercom, and past lives has been pricing discussions. So how do you build your pricing to customers, and how do you make it easy for sellers to quickly select, generate a contract, send that out? Once you have that paper process identified, can you get it from I'm going to commit to using it to sign signature? This deal is closed, especially in like high volume sale like we have in our um, lower segments or smaller segments. So yeah, I think building the right pricing model to meet your customers with what's fair is huge, and I think it's never going to be absolutely perfect. But where I've seen missteps is changing it back and forth quite a bit, or making it too confusing, where it's all good intention, but it's actually hard for a rep and a customer to get behind. So that's where I've seen, and then there's a lot of systems levers there too. If you make a very complicated pricing model, it's very hard to build into your systems and build kind of a quick and easy contracting motion.
Interesting. And so what about like one of the things I see sometimes is like too many tools too fast. How do you think about like what's the right velocity to try to bring in best of breed versus making it feel like too chaotic and not understanding how anything works, like for the reps? Where do you think the Goldilocks is there?
Yeah, I mean, usually POCs or trials are free. So mentioned before, I like to kind of, if someone's really asking for a tool, there's usually a need there. And there's usually something that they either are not getting or don't know about that we already have to help them accomplish what they're looking to do. So leading with empathy and taking that 15, 30 minutes to understand what the team is asking for. If it's a team issue, if it's more of a top down, like this is a gap or a white space that we have in how we're reaching our customers, then going to market and understanding how the best in class vendors work. If we can trial them, great. That's what we did with Momentum. Ended up trialing them against a couple of competitors and realized we're going to select the vendors that have the highest slope. We kind of use that as well for people. Like we want to find people not based on past experience necessarily, but where we think they'll be in the next 6 months, how quickly they can onboard. And I do the same with vendors. So is this vendor willing to jump on it, like open up a Slack channel, be very responsive to new asks, and can they build a product that will kind of suit our needs in the future, not just their current product, but in the next year, 2 years, what's their product velocity and shipment like. So that's kind of how we select vendors. I do think we can't just go and trial every single vendor. So there's a balance there. It's usually the way we strike that balance is just stack ranking the asks from our teams and saying, all right, I know we want to check out this vendor, but we have these 3 things that are above that. So we're going to work on these this week.
Makes sense. It's so funny that you say slope. This is my number one criteria for picking, especially early stage vendors, because like we were, I don't know, 15 million ARR when we started using Momentum, and I think I might have been their first like full paying customer. You and I were both early, but Avara we use for AI sim. We were one of their first like handful of customers. Even for SalesLoft, I was a first 10 customer. Chorus, Chili Piper, like I've been early on a bunch of these things, and I've picked right more times than wrong. And the thing that I'm always screening for is just like, how fast is their product velocity? Because most of them are going to have a good idea. Like, so CRM autofill. There's a bunch of companies trying to do it, and I talked to them all. And the thing I'm trying to find an alignment of philosophy. Like, do they want to approach this problem in the way that I think it should be approached? And so, like, just in this category, Momentum wanted to give me a lot more flexibility to write custom prompts and wire that into a specific custom field that I can just like spin up in Salesforce and then start routing data into. Versus another vendor I looked at, it was much more opinionated. Like it recorded your calls, it filled out Medic, and it was like only Medic, and it was like out of the box. And for me, I'm much too opinionated about how I want to run things. And so just like philosophically, I could strike those. And then it came down to 2 companies, and I was able to like do a demo, see some stuff, look at how fast they delivered new product over a couple week period. And then we ended up piloting, whether it's like Momentum or Avara or some of these tools. And if I could give them feedback, see them implement it in the roadmap and ship it, then I was onto something. Like then I knew. So it's funny you say slope. That's like my identical path here.
Right. Yeah, we had similar, like you said, there's tools like Gong that own the transcripts. They just maybe didn't build the autofill right away. But in that eval, I think very similar. We had some really easy asks. Momentum is very early on the writing emails to send out, which I think we have probably 5 tools that can technically do that today.
Yeah.
If the other tools haven't done it yet, they're probably building it because it seems like the lowest hanging fruit.
It's commodity. It's
generative AI. So yeah, people can pick and choose where they want to get their emails. You could probably do it directly in Gmail at this point. But
yeah.
But aside from that, there's kind of this autofill idea that you just take a transcript, fill some information in based on the transcript, but there's much more nuance to it. So there's, do you want to override? Do you not want to override? What are the parameters for if you override data? Do you want to do a look back in a higher context window? So these are some of the things that Momentum's actually built out, which, that's why I'm very glad we went with them in the long term, because now we can look at these context windows, fill out information, and be much more opinionated and specific of who and when we're updating things. And seen a few other AI newer vendors too that are very promising, building kind of early at the user level, where it gives individual users the ability to kind of dictate how their AI works, but it's still a kind of a interesting way to do it, rather than kind of the Salesforce methodology of here you have admin rights or you don't have admin rights.
Yeah.
Are you being paid what you're worth? Pavilion's compensation report has become an industry standard for go-to-market leaders to benchmark their compensation, equity, and other employment terms. We're refreshing the report for 2025, and we need your input today. To get early access to the results, take the anonymous survey at joinpavilion.com/comp. That's COMP, or click the link in the show notes.
So let's actually, before I transition to the AI topic, I wanted to, there's one other thing you mentioned there about like stack ranking. So I think one of the hardest parts about being in RevOps and systems is like you have all of these stakeholders with all of these asks, and they're all important. and you just get pulled in a million directions. So how do you think about prioritization? Like, what's your framework? How do you make decisions? And just like talk to me about that process.
Yeah. Yeah. We went to back in the core RevOps days, I was sent to an offsite with Michael Deering, who's early eBay, but he spelled out the Drake's equation, which is an equation for estimating how much life would be, in the universe outside of
Hmm.
Earth. And anyways, he kind of brought it over to the revenue Drake's equation, where you look at revenue, and that basically equals number of leads times lead conversion times average deal size and minus churn. And so with that, we try to map most of our projects to, all right, we really want to write these really tailored emails or get these alerts for intent in this way. That maps onto number of leads, because we'll see more leads if we have better triggers for or signals for these potential buyers. And so we try to map all of our projects onto some part of that funnel and then estimate how much revenue will this bring us if we execute on it, based on team size. So if like we're building something for a much larger go-to-market team versus a team of two, or a small tiger team, we'll prioritize that. So we kind of do our internal, that's kind of how I think about priority of projects. Obviously, in the RevOps world, there's just non-negotiables. Like, hey, our fiscal year is turning over. We have to update these things. We have to ship new quotas. We have to put these new plans in place. So there's things that just have to be done. And then outside of that, we work with our leads, operational leads, and go-to-market leads, and just say, like, here are the things that we're just doing. We have to have these done. And then here are the things that we think is the order, and you correct us if we're mistooken there. And then also we can add some scope to it. So this is a quick win. Let's put this at the top, and then we have our cadence weekly. We just drop some notes in, look at the stack rank, and prioritize from there.
And you said you're agile?
Yep.
Okay. On a 6-week cycle then?
We do 2-week sprints.
2-week sprints. Okay.
Then we try to publish a roadmap for each half of the year with like big ticket items.
Okay. Very cool.
On the date, like we do a daily stand up too, and that's where we just kind of we sync on like just let's list the top 2 to 3 things you want to get done that day. You mentioned days are super important at Ramp. We want to not get through one day without shipping anything. So if I notice there's people that have like 10 things, we try to pick some out and say, like, let's delegate these elsewhere or communicate that they're not going to be done today.
Cool.
The other intake session on that is just jam sessions. So we often meet with our sales leads, but we have optional kind of office hours with individual go-to-market folks where we can do some shadows, empathy interviews, understand how they're actually click pathing through our tools and navigating. And that actually gives us a lot of good signal on if things are being adopted or totally not adopted, and some new ideas of systems that we can implement or improve.
Very cool. The theme that I'm repeatedly getting here is just distance to stakeholder empathy, starting with customer, then your user. And it makes a ton of sense. I mean, it seems common sense to me, but it's not, certainly not the way most orgs run. But this seems like very deeply embedded in how you think.
Yeah. I've been on the other side of it too, or I've seen companies or talked to other leaders that feel like they're submitting a ticket to systems and it's going into a black box, and that's how things run. And unfortunately, at big companies, I think some of these tickets do get lost and are not prioritized. But the closer you stay to the end stakeholders and the more visibility you can share, I think the better, and the faster you'll build.
Yeah, cool. So let's get into the AI topic. So we talked about momentum. I don't even think we really defined what it is, but basically for us, it's a tool, takes in all of our transcripts and then fills in CRM fields and then does a bunch of other stuff. Alerts. So when certain things happen on calls or doesn't happen, it alerts us. So that's like a big use case for us. What are your other big AI tools and use cases, both off the shelf stuff you've built, BizOps, business systems versus applied AI? I'm curious to hear just sort of like the full scope of your AI utilization.
Yeah, our go-to-market engineering team, our growth eng team, has been very early with their AI use cases. So we see a lot of kind of tools popping up with that end-to-end funnel of understanding a warm lead, scoring, and sending out emails. We've been doing that for a good amount of time. And then like those email responses, making sure we score those and understanding like, all right, is this a positive intent, low intent email? Is it something we should hop on right away? So that's one kind of cool use case we've been doing for quite a bit of time.
And what do you do the scoring with?
We have some scoring that comes through. I believe it's on top of front app for
Okay.
kind of a shared inbox piece.
Okay.
And then we also kind of A/B test that against kind of our main SD generated emails. So we're not an AI shop necessarily of just only AI emails. We hold people responsible for the emails that they send and try to use AI to enhance their efficiency and enhance the emails that they send out. One other tool we use on the scoring and AI front is Actively. They use LLMs and inference to look through. Or, yeah, I'm not exactly. Let's see. We'll mark that. I'm not too sure. I don't want to speak to their exact use case, but we'll use Actively on the SDR side. And what they do is they build an outbound scoring model for us. So they'll look through past email correspondence, past deals, look at data in Salesforce, as well as external data to essentially say like, hey, it's been 9 months. This last email said they're going to renew their other contract here in the next few months. Let's route that deal to somebody. So that's kind of our outbound scoring model. And it gets better over time. It looks at who's actually converting from those emails that are sent, and that will retrain the model. So that's kind of a self-learning model that's been really positive for us.
Cool. So you've got email response scoring, lead scoring. Where does this GTM engineering team fit, like in the org? It seems like, because I heard Rahul has the applied AI team, which was doing some go-to-market stuff, and I'm going to ask you about Toby. And then you've got GTM engineering, you're doing a bunch of stuff. Like, how does that all fit together?
Yeah. So the applied AI team is kind of an overlay. So we can engage. I mentioned that the company's pretty flat. If we have a new idea and we think, all right, the applied AI team could be very much involved in this project, or this is project work for our engineering team. We'll engage with that team, and they'll ship things very quickly. I mentioned kind of our operating motions for the go-to-market org and the systems and RevOps org. We kind of operate as a pod, and then we'll pull in additional end resources if we need to. And so that's kind of how it works. And yeah, AI is kind of embedded in quite a bit of our workflows now. I know they've worked quite a bit with our risk and underwriting process. So that's definitely cleaned up a lot of the human, component of that, or aided in the human component of risk and underwriting. They're also very involved in our product, so making Ramp more intelligent. And I use Ramp every day with procurement and for expensing trips and travel booking. We're doing a company kickoff here in a week or so. And so it's actually gotten quite a bit smarter with AI, and it can basically guess what I'm doing and generate.
The 1, 2, 3, that's the best.
Oh, it's amazing.
We're a Ramp customer. That was our other. It was Redpoint Momentum, and we're a very excited Ramp customer. My VP of Finance was actually apparently a really early customer at his last gig, but I just noticed. I took a picture of a receipt pretty recently, and then it pinged me back. This looks like, and it was like a parking receipt or a whatever, and it's gotten it right every time. And I'm just like, this is awesome. I mean, I'm a nerd about it. I really am excited about this stuff, but it was such an interesting application of such useful AI. Where I was like, oh, this is the best. Like, this is why you bet on Ramp, because it's already a sick product today, but like, it's going to get better faster than everything else.
I love that too. It's like, why do I have to write out a whole message? Let me just hit one, get on with my day. That's one of my favorite features. The other is just like putting your email in for a receipt rather than anything else, and then it will just pull it straight in. You have to do anything.
Yeah.
That's great too, especially at restaurants. But yeah, so they're embedded all across the company, and we engage them if there's kind of an internal build that we want to do. Momentum is so self-service though. Like some of these AI applications or use cases on the go-to-market side, my team will build just directly in those tools in Momentum, or work with the Actively team. So they're not necessarily involved in every single use case of AI, but they're deeply embedded in risk, product, and some go-to-market projects.
Cool. What's your favorite your favorite application of AI that you guys have built and deployed so far?
Ooh, I think the newest one or the next one, I guess, should be the answer. But no, I think I like our context window of why we're losing deals and why we're winning deals has been one of my new favorites. Um, and the reason is because we have all these fields in Salesforce, and that's been standard operating procedure for years, or since I've
Yeah.
been the system is tell me the reason number one, the sub reason, and at the end of the month, let's do a big report and look at the pie chart. But but with this, it gives just so much more context of, hey, here's the sections on each part. They didn't hit this section. There was not any product gaps. It was more of a timing and transitional change reason. So it gives a lot more context of why we might be losing deals. And then
Hmm.
could layer on AI if we really wanted to pull that information out back to structured fields, right? So it's not a 1 or 0 thing where we have structured fields or we have more useful information. We could take that information, pull it back to some structure and score and report on it. So that's one thing I really like, as well as the handoff. It just gives our CSM teams so much more context on deals when they're onboarding and activating.
Mm.
Here are the champions, here are the people you'll be working with, here are the discussions, here's the link to the Gong call, things like that. So like pulling
And
out.
how did you build that? So that's a dossier that goes to CSM, or this is in Salesforce? Give me that. That's a cool one. Explain it a
Yeah,
little more.
we have momentum call notes where it pulls out both all the med pick pieces of who's involved, and we're just shipping kind of the win breakdown, which is context window of last 6 months. Let's look at the emails and calls, and let's get the key pieces of information. Which products are they committed to using of Ramp, or which products we think or infer that they'll be using? What cards or bank accounts are they using? Where they're at in the application process? Things like that. What they're, just kind of some core features that the CSM team usually uses to do a run kind of a productive onboarding and kickoff call.
And so that's a flow and a prompt you've built in Momentum,
Yep.
and then it pipes into Slack or Salesforce.
Both. So
Okay.
we were looking to DM. We'll probably DM both the CSM and the account executive, so
Yeah.
that they're on a thread together. We've explored some deal rooms. We haven't really went live with deal rooms quite yet, but the DMs are something we've been using with a lot of success at the top of funnel, like SD. Old world was SDR would hand off a deal to AE. AE would work the deal, and then they would have to ping each other back and forth on how it's going. Now with Momentum, we have that a shared channel, and just group DM them both and say, like, here's the context of that call, here's how it went, are we going to move this to an SQL, are there next steps? And they can do it straight from the buttons in Slack, which is nice.
Very cool.
So,
Yeah. The handoff use case is one we haven't done yet, but it seems so obvious now. I'm feeling like I'm an idiot. Like summarizing the entire deal. We typically use Momentum just to pipe everything into fields. Like instead of the Slack summary and a big chunk of stuff, like I'm trying to break down into discrete components. Like, tell me about this part of the deal. Like a good example is, so we charge a 5% service fee to the guest when they check out, and that's part of our monetization. That's how we keep the cost low for the restaurant owner. But if the restaurant owner doesn't know that on a sales call and they learn it on onboarding, they're going to be pissed because they feel like you
Yep.
left something out. And so I built a prompt to be like, did the sales rep specifically mention the 5% guest service fee? And then there's a checkbox as a custom field on the opportunity record. And any deal that doesn't have that checked, then it can get flagged and notified to a channel with the managers, for example. And so my strategy has been like, put it all on the object, put it all on the account object, the opportunity object. But you've got me thinking about, like, should I then pull that all back out in a summary to hand to an onboarding person that might have like a broader context? That's
yeah,
cool.
that's a perfect use case. Another similar one that we've been using is we don't necessarily need to ask every call, but our teams are very interested in which countries people are operating in. Are they multi-country or operating internationally, and where are their employee bases? So we're pulling that out and saying yes or no. If this was explicitly discussed, or you can infer it, please enter an answer. If not, don't say anything. It might come up in the next call. So
Yeah.
that's where it's been really nice to be able to tailor those prompts and say, all right, sellers, we're not going to block you and have you fill out this data that you'll probably put bad information on because it was never
Yeah.
discussed, right? Like a lot of times you just don't discuss these things, but you still want to progress the deal. So those are a couple of really good examples of where I think it's really useful.
Yeah, one of the things we've done there is, so originally I wanted to just have momentum to bring it to the rep, and they have to go like edit and enter. And the adoption was like pretty good, but a lot of people weren't even just doing the like, click to accept. And I was like, well, I don't want to just have AI do it all because it's going to be wrong some of the time, and I want to make sure the data is good. But then I did the numbers, and we ran an experiment, and just like having it fill in the fields automatically every time, and obviously the rep has the chance to go change it. Just we got a larger volume of high quality data running it that way, like not even asking the rep to click accept, just having it auto fill, and then they can update.
Yeah. I mean, we're still accepting for our core fields just to have some sort of stamp of approval there, but it's been awesome for the fields that aren't P0, P1, but we want data there. Those will just auto write every time. Yeah, so that's been super helpful. The other use case that we're kind of auto writing for is the, oh shoot, I lost it. I had one other good use case in mind.
That's okay.
Fell out.
And so what about other AI use cases? So like we've talked a bunch about momentum stuff. What are the other really interesting use cases outside of scoring and anything else to mention?
Yeah, I think we're using a couple tools that are interesting on kind of new information with agents at time. So at time of interest. So Clay's an example of one that you can kind of put in information, get an output. Rocks is a newer tool that we've been using on the go-to-market side, which is very user friendly and a good way to visualize your books of business and customizable at the user level. So they can add a new column and say which of my accounts are public. We'll go do like some like natural language agent stuff and
Oh, cool.
So there's a lot of cool
ROX.
Yeah, rox.ai.
Hmm.
Similar, very, very new company, but high slope. And so we've seen some success with them. And yeah, it seems very user centric, much better interface than our CRM right now. And it's a bit more configurable at the user level, which is great. Other AI tools. I mean, there's a lot of new AI features just built into our existing tool stack today that we've been exploring. So trying to keep on top of what outreach is launching that's new, that's AI versus Gong versus our existing bigger players, Salesforce and Agentforce, and the opportunity there is huge for them. And so determining how we'll engage with that, try all that, and then also just building internally, saying, all right, let's test something out. Let's build Toby, or let's build sales engineer that's AI and stuff like that are kind of fun, exciting builds that our team is able and willing to do really quickly, which is why it's so fun to work here.
Yeah. So talk to me about Toby. I would love to hear more about what that looks like.
Yeah. So that was a bot built, I think, in a weekend it's embedded in our Slack instance. Ask a question, get a response based on some transcript information. And so yeah, I think it's been adopted pretty well. I'll have to come back to you on that actually. I might mark this section and just say I'm trying to get more context on all the Toby use cases, but I don't know.
All right, I'll delete the Toby question.
Okay, appreciate you. I think it got refactored to our AI sales engineer. I'm just trying to figure that out.
Okay, makes sense. So how do you think about build versus buy? Like, what do you got way more internal AI capabilities than most companies, but when do you decide to go get a tool off the shelf versus have these internal teams build?
Yeah. This is another thing I've kind of changed my mind about over time. I used to be very much in the camp of let's put together requirements doc with a checklist of which features we're going to need, and let's do a build versus buy analysis. And oftentimes it was much cheaper to buy. So you do a bunch of demos with a bunch of different companies. and decided to either build or buy. And now I think in the last few years, we've really just went both routes. Like why not both? Essentially, let's build and buy, and let's do a little bake off with an experiment of if we have one engineer trying to build specific features, could we maintain it? What feature sets do we need? But let's also engage with best in class vendors and do some demos to understand why they built in a certain way, what they did build, how their customers are actually using it. Would we get additional benefit that maybe we didn't capture on an initial spreadsheet? Because oftentimes you build these vendor analysis sheets. These are really cool features, but you find 10 more that you'd want within 2-3 months, right? Or you find 10 more that you're using quite a bit within a few months. So, so my thinking on build versus buy is one, let's look at the ROI of the cost and try to maximize or reduce how much we're spending on software tools, but also maximize that ROI of the tool. So if there's a few different features that we would use that will increase our ROI, I'm very much in the buy camp. But if there's tools that we want to have real control over, and they're kind of a differentiator to how we operate, then buying is usually the right move. And often we're going to do both, or we're at least going to put some people on it and do like a little bit of both with both engineering and the go-to-market team. So that's how I've been thinking about it more now. Is trials are often free. We can see how things work and determine the build versus buy.
Yeah. I've really liked the fact that you can pilot tools so much more today than 5-10 years ago.
Yep.
You can just plug it in, let it go, see what it's like in production. Especially today, there's so much vaporware. So many people being like, oh, my AI does this and that, and it'll tell you every single call. And then you run it and it's just like hallucinating gobbledygook. And being able to really like pilot tools and vet them out. This is advice I give to people a lot of the time. It's like just push the vendor to pilot. Like if you have some sway, you're a big company or it's a sizable deal, most will let you pilot. And it's the ultimate way to just like de-risk like crazy.
Yep, exactly. Same page. And we push for a lot of pilots per year. Definitely worth a demo. And nothing really takes more than a few hours to get an initial setup, I've found, in terms of software.
Yeah.
Now they just connect to a few systems. We get sign off from security, sign a mutual NDA, and we're off and running. And that's so much faster than waiting 2 weeks to do a demo. And they build this massive deck of all their features and get engineers in the call. It's like, let's just try the product out. Get a small team using it and see if we adopt it. And ultimately, build versus buy, or whichever we determine. Sometimes we have both. There are options to use both, and whatever people adopt usually wins because ultimately, I think our customers, our internal customers, our sales team, go-to-market teams, if they're using something a lot, there's obviously some value there. So we try to always, where we can, measure adoption and usage of our tools.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think like Ramp has been so successful, and you clearly just have such significant resourcing that like not a lot of companies do, and that momentum and resourcing becomes an advantage of its own. For be like, hey, we're going to look at build and buy and let the user tell us what the answer is. It's such a fortunate position because you're going to get really good decisions. You're going to get the utilization and adoption. And it's interesting how momentum in startups just snowballs. Like you build a lead and then you attract the smartest people. You have more money to be experimenting and give people more freedom. And like that grows your lead as a business. Because it does feel like Ramp is increasingly like separating itself from its competitors. I just as a user of these products and somebody who watches the markets closely, like the tech space, like the gulf seems to be widening.
Yeah, and to be clear, we don't build and buy everything, but I wish we had the resources to say let's build Salesforce or Gong and buy it as well. But no, you're absolutely right. Like the people that work here are excited to work here, and often the projects of building are actually pretty fun. Like Slack bots, we probably have a few different versions of how we built Slack bots. Interface with transcript data. I know our data team does a bunch with that as well. So building some of these things has happened. Doesn't happen with every software. We're not going to, build a new ironclad necessarily for redlining internally before purchasing that. But Yeah, it is a privileged position to be in, and I think it also accelerates the excitement from teams to try new things and do new experiments.
Yeah, very cool. Um, so last question before we hop into quick fire. Um, so over the last couple of months, O1 came out in Q4, O3 is now like out in the ether and is being discussed widely in AI Twitter, AI X. Um, how have reasoning models changed what you think is possible, or how are you thinking differently about your AI roadmap with reasoning now, like really being here?
Well, just one right off the bat, it just makes using these tools so much better. Like it makes them
Mhm.
actually useful. Things like uploading a vendor contract and really pulling out numbers and things like that. Internally, we have a procurement tool that's just gotten so much better over time. And so with that, it's made kind of our analysis. We just went through budgeting for this year. It's helped with let's import some contracts, let's consolidate, how much we're spending on each of these enrichment vendors, and it just works. So our internal processes have gotten a lot faster for things that might
Mm,
take a person or an analyst a good amount of time. They've gotten faster. Even writing something simple like validation rules in Salesforce, like let's write this, test this for us. I know my team uses that quite a bit.
hmm,
Um, Code review. So internally, I think it's made things really good. Where I see it in market potentially opening up is suggesting things for deals and more complex deal shapes, dollar values, discounting,
mm,
things like that, based on your current customer base, your customer data. Like, what is a good deal shape for this customer? What's their propensity to buy? I think you have that in your models as well of like estimated GMV. I think that will get a lot better if it hasn't already for you.
yeah.
Um, but no, I'm excited to see where it goes, and I'm excited to layer in more models. I don't have anything very structured today, but I think if we talk again in the next year, it'll be a whole new world.
Yeah. It feels like um, you mentioned advice on deals. Every product I saw that gave you advice on deals, sounded really cool. You saw a demo, or especially when you pilot it with your own information, the insight was always like pretty lame and like obvious or not super helpful. But I definitely think reasoning models will be able to do such a better job there. Right? The framework I always use is, you know, AI to this point has been the world's hardest working intern. You just give it like tasks and tasks and make it do mundane research, and the quality is really good, but it's really at an intern level of sophistication, which is great if you need ground level stuff done. And I use AI all the time for my personal stuff and writing and thinking. And but the difference in reasoning model, just like in quality of output, now I'm starting to think, I'm like, okay, well, I had AI in this little box of simple stuff that's pattern recognition and things that are repetitive, but now that aperture is so much wider. Even like I got sick over the holidays and I went to the O1 model and dropped in like my symptoms and a bunch of stuff, and it has a bunch of information stored about me in memory. um, and the difference between what 4.0 and O1 gave me in terms of an output was like night and day, and better than like, far better than what the like telemedicine call I had was. And I was like, and that's when I was really like, okay, like this is different. So I'm excited to think about weaving this in more places. I think like complex problem shapes is definitely like on the roadmap now.
Yeah, and Perplexity, we've been using that quite a bit as well. It's like just recent stuff, like, hey, this vendor looks like this is breaking with this formula field connector or something like that. And they'll look at the
Hmm.
most recent, published information. They'll even scan Reddit, things like that. So it just makes it so much more useful. And yeah, suggested information, suggested action. I'm curious your thoughts as a company leader. It has sometimes felt kind of hokey until it doesn't, right? If it switches and says like, all right, this is the quote. We listened to your call. Do you accept it or not? And they just generate that for you. It'd be hard to imagine living in a world where, I have to go generate a quote, send it,
Yeah.
we'll do all this stuff. Whereas now it can just be accepted. And same, we use another tool called Atrium, which is kind of a sales manager tool, has a lot of AI cooked in, and you can kind of show show the step changes over time. Of it looks like was your standard, and this has changed over time, or the people are onboarding are now sending more emails. So you can see kind of anomaly tracking in real time with that tool when it as it relates to sales teams. And so that's been pretty helpful as well. And getting a quick breakdown, even if it's not perfect information or you have more context in your head, does seem like it's not very useful until you do catch something that you didn't otherwise know about.
Very interesting. That's Pete Kazanji's company, Atrium, you're talking about?
Yeah.
Oh, very cool. That's awesome to hear. Yeah, I think the thing that has really just struck me over the last few months is just how much of the sales process will eventually be like AI assisted and driven. Your quote generation is a great call, or now really being able to give a rep an assist on like a consequential next step suggestion. Because like some of these tools that I won't name, it's just like give them a call, send them an email. Like this deal is it's just not helpful versus saying, hey, this is the type of content that was clicked on. This is the type of content that got the highest click-through rate at this deal stage with this sort of context from the transcripts and emails. Like I think the model sophistication is like almost there to do this in a much more material way.
I totally agree, and that's what a lot of companies are sort of converging on. We've seen good signal from Atrium, or from Atrium, from Rocks, and from a few others like Actively, where the goal is really to give you that suggested action, and we have some of the larger players too. But that suggested next action is something we shouldn't have our sellers wasting time to go dig and find. And if they can get to a place where they're spending their time meeting the customer where they are, and actually being good on the phones and closing deals, that's much better use of time rather than kind of finding that next suggested email to write or action or follow up. And if that's surfaced, then I think their time can be spent doing more, doing things to make them better at their job.
Yeah, I shared this opinion in another interview because people are like, oh, AI is going to replace salespeople. AI is going to replace this, replace that. And my feedback was actually AI is going to replace a bunch of the parts of the sales process that aren't sales. And there's an argument to be made that salespeople will do more selling than they've ever done. And actually, the craft of sales will make a big comeback because salespeople won't be as encumbered by all of the BS that they don't want to do. I don't want them doing because it's not very valuable. Updating Salesforce stuff, moving something stages, sending like a basic follow-up email, like admin stuff, like a handoff to onboarding. All of this stuff you start to abstract away when the model quality is good enough. And then what's left? It's engaging with customers. It's like being on the phones. It's actually getting deals done. And so I think, as much as we think like sales will be replaced by AI, I actually think AI is going to let salespeople do like way more sales than ever, which would be the world I want to live in. So maybe this is an optimistic view of the world, but I think that's likely.
I totally agree. Sales and strategic thinking, right? It'll pull people out of the day-to-day task and think like, oh, I have this customer. There's a pattern here. Let's engage in new partnerships. Let's do some more co-branding or things like that. Like let's build these relationships in a way that's useful for both the customer and the team. And yeah, filling out Salesforce fields is not an ideal use of time for a growing and scaling go-to-market team. So excited to slowly but surely chip away at the operational tasks with AI.
Yeah, cool. All right, let's move into quickfire. So, what separates a good RevOps and systems leader versus a truly great and exceptional one in your mind?
Ooh, I think focusing on the right things and making things as simple as possible are what make a great leader. I think a good leader can say, all right, we've checked these boxes. We have a pick list of or checklist of things to do each month, each year, each quarter. A great leader really takes a step back and says, what do we want to get done, and how will it influence our bookings or revenue this year, and then focus on the big projects that make a shift. And also, how do we get out of the monotonous day-to-day kind of requests and asks? And I think that's where you simplify things for the field and you make standard processes and rules of engagement that are clear, concise, and there's a simple way for exceptions to be made. So I think that's where you can waste a lot of internal operational sides if there's just misalignment or confusion around rules of engagement or things that should be relatively straightforward on the sales team.
Cool. What's the most common advice you give to people in your role and trying to be great stakeholder partners to their revenue leadership?
Yeah, I would say just be very curious. So challenge the team to understand the workflows of the teams that they support intimately and know them better than the actual people do and how to do things better. So I put everybody through onboarding of the teams that they support so they really feel like they're in seat. I'd say curiosity is the big one. Make sure you ask why and understand what the ask is before we sign up to do any new work.
Cool. And the flip side of that coin, how can revenue leaders be great partners to their RevOps and systems people?
I think just framework for how to ask for things. Like usually use the framework as a blank. I need blank so that I can do blank. And usually that last piece is what you're trying to dig out of the conversation is what do you want to do that you can't do today, or what do you want to report on that you can't report on today? And let's jam on a solution.
Cool. What's the hardest lesson you've had to learn as a leader?
Ooh. I think the hardest lesson is sometimes folks aren't right for the role. Here at Ramp, we've been very lucky to get really top talent, but when people aren't right for the role, just talking about it and being honest and open is usually the right move early on.
That is definitely a hard one to learn, but an important one. Lastly, what's the best thing you've read in the last 12 months? Best book?
I read the book Latitude. I really liked it. It's basically about the invention of a water, a clock that can work well enough to judge latitude for ships back in I think the 1700s. I'll have to mark that one.
Wow, very esoteric, very esoteric read.
It's a pretty quick read, but really interesting. The problem to be solved is they just had no idea where they were latitudinally. Something that was an interesting problem that was ultimately solved, but good kind of history book.
That's cool. Well, this is awesome. I learned a ton, and it's really cool to hear how you think about the world and see this function that is ever more important and what you're implementing. So I appreciate the time, Nate. This was a blast.
Yeah, Kyle, thanks for having me.
Thank you for listening to the Revenue Leadership Podcast. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to subscribe, and you can find a link in the show notes. And be sure to leave a 5-star review, share it with your network, and please join me next Wednesday for another great conversation.